Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about some of the best mechanics of Total War Warhammer 3. Things that Creative Assembly should keep in mind when designing future games, be it 40k, or Medieval 3, or even updating things in Warhammer 3 itself. So starting off at number 5, we have the supporter system for Kislev. The current one, not the old one. The old one was not really great. The new one, despite certain issues with Castalton and Katrin, but the new one is substantially better. In essence, it is a separate research tree. That's the way I view it. And it is much better than regular research trees, because the kind of benefits that you acquire over here are pretty damn great. For instance, if we look at some of the things like Duty's Reward, gaining replenishing campaign movement range after winning a battle, that is really good. Or just campaign movement range in general, or unit experience, or construction cost, or effect duration for Kislevite battle prayers, or growth in all provinces. There's a whole bunch of benefits to be acquired here. But what I do like about this system is you're encouraged to not just go all in on one side or another. Yes, the Grey Orthodoxy in general is the better choice, but you do have to balance it out between Orthodoxy and Ice Court. And imagine a system in a campaign where you didn't just have two factions to balance it out between, but multiple factions that you would be balancing things between in order to not suffer penalties, but also gain some substantial benefits in the process. Because yes, the Orthodoxy is generally better, but of course there are some pretty nice benefits as well from the Ice Court with regards to what you're gaining from the supporter system. So I think the idea of having a system like this going forward, where you're balancing for a meter like this, balancing the favor of different factions through just natural gameplay would be great. Because the way you balance this meter is, well, you build stuff if you think you're favoring one faction versus another, but especially with Boris Ursus and Astankia, you get it just by fighting against chaos. You get supporters for both of them. You can also help one faction over another. So I think having a kind of neutral enemy that everyone just likes you for fighting them, that's a great idea. But also different actions that you can take in order to improve your standing with one faction versus another more. And this is great for Kislev, because one of the things that was a problem for Kislev pre-rework is that they were not actually incentivized to find chaos. Of course, Chaos Wasteland, not great climate, lots of penalties. Of course, Kislev has gotten the ability of removing climate penalties, but all the same, it was just much easier to conquer the Empire. But now, you genuinely have a lot of different reasons to really find chaos because of the fact that you gain supporters. You're also using those supporters to really benefit you in terms of your standing, in terms of your provinces. For instance, when you look at Spiritual Conquest, getting 100 devotion for each captured settlement in Chaos Wasteland climates is a huge deal, because it means you can actually use those devotion actions. So yeah, you can still go around and fight different factions, but you are heavily encouraged to fight chaos, which fits Kislev very, very well. At number 4, we have the Chaos Dwarf resource system. The actual implementation of it does leave something to be desired, because you have too few resources early on and too many later on in a campaign. But the idea of having multiple resources that you have to balance out throughout the course of a campaign is, simply put, amazing. Like using raw materials to construct many buildings and get armaments in the process later on, using conclave influence or political influence that you gain by sacrificing your laborers to Hashut. The idea of this system is just fantastic. Again, it's a question of more so of implementation, and I do think Troy and Pharaoh did it better in the sense that you could trade for resources. You didn't just have like, oh, let me go to a faction and just do a regular trade agreement. You didn't have that in Troy and Pharaoh. You had to trade specific resources. Yes, it is a question of balance. It is a question of AI, and it is a question of design, etc. But again, the idea of multiple resources and actually making resources feel worth like something is great. Like, for instance, it makes these kind of resource settlements worth something else than just like, oh, here's a resource, you can get it for trade. Well, here you're getting it for raw materials. Or in Troy, it would be a strategic resource. It would push your campaign towards acquiring specific settlements just because of the benefits of those resources, especially gold. Again, balancing, pacing, etc. But the core idea of this system is amazing. And number 3, we have instant construction. Specifically the type that Dark Elves have, not Chaos Dwarves, because Chaos Dwarves have very long construction times by default, whereas Dark Elves have normal construction times, but they can also use their slaves in order to instantly build structures, which is a phenomenal system. It's a phenomenal system because it means when you're taking over territories, you can instantly make them useful. Of course, you are having to spend a strategic resource in the process in order to achieve that. It gives you a lot of benefits. It makes campaigns feel more dynamic and interesting. It's adding to what it means to build an empire really across the map. Because building an empire in a game is not about spending dozens of turns waiting for shit to be constructed. It's about, okay, I have these resources. How do I spend them? Is it worth spending these resources in a province in order to make that province useful? And that's what I really think about instant construction, where it can work well. And really, when we talk about instant construction, Dark Elves aren't the first to have it, of course. Like, Chaos Dwarves had it first in Warhammer 3, and then we had Troy and Pharaoh also having it. But the thing about Dark Elves is it means when you're playing one of their campaigns, like, take for instance the province of Obsidian Peaks. Generally, Taurox does destroy it, and so rebuilding it is usually a very long-term prospect and may not be worth it for a very, very long time. But when you do have instant construction, suddenly that rebuilding process seems a lot more doable. And when you do consider that you do get the layers of Claire, Corond, which give you 100 exacta animals production and War Hydra recruitment, it does start looking a bit different. Also, lumber. Like, one shouldn't underestimate the value of lumber for Dark Elves. So it does mean that even when everything is devastated, the ability of rebuilding it, assuming you have the resources for it, is much better. I think Dark Elves do work better than other races in this respect, or every other time that Grave Assembly has done this, because you do have a lot of laborers. And using instant construction constantly, though, will consume them very quickly. So you're not just building up a significant pool of laborers very slowly and then using them, later on. You're using them throughout the entire campaign experience from turn 1 for instant benefits, and you continue to use them throughout the entire course of the campaign. And that's why this system is amazing. And number 2, we have the Warband upgrade system that was created with Amazons back in Troy and then used for the Warriors of Chaos with the Champions of Chaos rework. Warband upgrade is an amazing system from the simple perspective that it means that your units throughout the course of a campaign, the units you start your campaign with, the units you recruit early on and then you rank up, they continue to be useful throughout the entire course of that campaign. And that is something important when you are playing a campaign in Warhammer 3, because you usually end up having the choice of, do I decide to get rid of these units to recruit higher tier units, or do I keep these units because they're just better due to the experience benefit? Well, Warriors of Chaos with the Warband upgrade system don't have that choice. In fact, I would dare say that Warband upgrade system is such a phenomenal system in general throughout the course of the game that it is worth using the mod that gives it to every race. In fact, I would dare say that many races do work much better with it than warriors of chaos themselves. Warband recruitment is not a great system, but Warband upgrade is perfect. I mean, I think it would fit very well with Space Marines, for instance, like if we're talking about 40k. But in general, just as a system, the idea of, again, you take units, you promote them, and then you get better units as a result of that. And keep in mind, people talk about power, but let me emphasize something. Upgrading units through Warband upgrade means you're paying higher upkeep. That's one of the main limiting factors in a campaign. It's that upkeep increase, the resources you're spending, the gold you are also spending in order to switch units around. It also means that your armies have a lot more flexibility, because usually the way we play in a campaign, we build armies, or what you're incentivized to do is build armies for general purpose, unless you know specifically you're going to deal with certain opponents that require certain compositions. But usually there are certain army comps that are better than others. Warband upgrades allows you to have a wide variety of units. Like if you're fighting a melee faction, okay, I switch Chaos Warriors and Marauders to gray weapons. If I'm fighting a range faction, I put them on shields. If I'm dealing with cavalry, I might get some halberds or spears, depend on what I'm tackling in that specific context. Again, there are things that could be improved here, but I do believe the idea of the system works very damn well. Finally, at number 1, we have the grudge system, really. Combination of Age of Reckoning, Legendary Grudges, and Confederations. Of course, we could also consider Malachi's Adventures as part of this package, because why not? But really, everything that Creative Assembly did with the Dwarf rework plus Malachi is just amazing from a mechanics perspective. First off, Age of Reckoning, despite some of the implementations based on the idea, here's how many grudges you have around you and territories next to you, that's how the meter fills up. I think that could have been different. Like basically every foe you defeat should have helped fill this meter, and this meter should not be based on, how many are around you. But still, the idea of pushing the player to go out there and deal with foes is a fantastic system. That is the first thing, because having these kind of short-term objectives, which that's how I would view Age of Reckoning, is in itself great because it makes the campaign far more dynamic. But then you add to that the idea of Legendary Grudges. So these are longer-term objectives, very long-term objectives, some of these, that give you significant benefits in a campaign. You want to do these. So in essence, while dwarves do have their victory conditions, I consider the Legendary Grudges the proper victory conditions in a dwarven campaign. And then finally, of course, the more grudges you get, the more easily you can get a lot of Legendary Lords in every single one of them. And you're not bound by distance or visibility or anything like that. You can just confederate other dwarf Legendary Lords through having a lot of settled grudges, which makes campaigns far more dynamic, regardless of which of these Legendary Lords you're playing as. Like, for instance, you may get Grombrindle early on, or you can get Forgrim or Belagar early on. And that gives you a lot of flexibility in a campaign and makes campaigns themselves just that much better for it. I really do think this is the kind of system that Creative Assembly should build going forward. Of course, depend on the race we're talking about, but a dynamic objective system in a campaign with tangible rewards, with both short-term, long-term, and in Malachi's case, with adventures medium-term objectives to achieve, makes for a far more interesting campaign system than anything we have else in the game. That's all I had to say. Christine signing out.